I love you all. And you know, that's one of the things I love about you, that you're so real. I don't have time for fake. Real deal is who we are. And that's why I love you. So there was a man named Dennis who was about to leave on a trip out of town, and he's like me, he has one suit. That's okay. Actually, I have two now, because one's getting ratty, and I bought one on sale last year because I felt like I needed to have a suit because, sometimes for funerals and weddings, you need to wear a suit. But, I told you guys 19 years ago when we came, if you wanted a pastor that's going to wear a suit and tie, vote no. And you voted yes, those of you who were here then. And so here we are, and there's no suit. But anyhow, Dennis had one suit, and he was packing the day before he was about to leave, and he discovered that one suit, which he needed to take on the trip, had a big spot on it. And so he thought, what in the world am I going to do? I can't wear this suit, and I can't go where I'm going and not have a suit. So he remembered that across town there was a dry cleaners that was called 1 Hour Dry Cleaners. And he drove all the way across town the next morning as soon as it opened to the 1 Hour Dry Cleaners to take his suit to get it cleaned in an hour. And so he gave it to the lady. She filled out the tag, and he said, I'll be back in an hour to get my suit. And she said, what do you mean? I won't have it for you until next Thursday. And he said, what do you mean? Your sign says that you do dry cleaning in an hour. And she said, oh, sir, I'm so sorry. That's just the name of our business. 1 Hour Dry Cleaning. Well, the same can be said about us as followers of Jesus. Our sign says Christian, but our lives say something else. And it's not just us here today. It's been a problem for a long time. In our study of the book of Romans, which originally was a letter that Paul wrote to the church at Rome, they were struggling with the inclusion of foreigners. You see, the church began as a bunch of people. Jesus came and he started walking around in his hometown and around the immediate region of where he was born and grew up, sharing the love of God and teaching about God's love. And people began to be enamored with him and follow him and got to know who he was. And that's how the Christian church began. But those people were Jews. And they grew up out of the Jewish religion and faith and heritage, and they had all kinds of practices that they were accustomed to doing. And then a whole bunch of foreigners, a whole bunch of Gentiles, people who weren't Jews, became attracted to Jesus and wanted to follow him and embrace that as their faith. And so they started following him too. And then the issue that Paul's addressing throughout the entire book of Romans, one of the reasons why he wrote the book of Romans was to address the issue, how do you include people who aren't of Jewish background in the church? Because you see, the Jews wanted to impose all of their practices, all of their rules, all of their regulations on the Gentiles. And so they're struggling with that. And that's what we've been looking at and talking about over these past couple months. And last week we began in chapter 12. We looked at verses 1 through 8, where Paul began to address that our lives and the way we live is what matters. That following Jesus isn't about wearing a label. It isn't about wearing a tattoo. It isn't about a bumper sticker. It isn't about a t-shirt. It's about our lives, dedicating our lives to loving and following and serving him. Last week, Paul said that we were to live our lives for God. He said, don't copy the behavior and customs of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And last week we talked about how it's not our heart that guides our actions as much as it's our mind. And if we're going to be transformed, it starts with our mind. We transform our mind. We change our mind. We change the way we think about something. And then that changes our heart. And then we moved on to talk about gifts. And you saw a wonderful collection of gifts being displayed here on the stage this morning. And we talked about how all of us have a gift, and we're invited to use that gift for the glory of God and for the betterment of each other. And so I'm not going to say any more about last week. It'll be up on the web this afternoon along with this sermon, and joyfilled.com/media is where you can find that. Today, Paul continues. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting about chapter 12 is, you've heard me say time and time again, I don't understand what Paul's saying here. Or I've said a couple of times, I don't know why I agreed to preach through this, because Paul's just talking and he talks around and around and around, and I call it circuitous thinking or circuitous talking. He seems to say something over and over and over again in a different way, and you kind of don't really understand where he is or what he's talking about. But there's no question that in this chapter 12, you can understand everything Paul's saying because he's straightforward and to the point. As followers of Jesus, we are called to live by another way, the Jesus way. Our sign and our actions must align. Following Jesus, as I've already said, is not about a label. It's not about a tattoo. It's not about a bumper sticker. It's not about jewelry. It's not about a t-shirt. It's a way of life. A way of life that is markedly different from the world and the way of the world. A way of life that is overflowing with love, that is overflowing with forgiveness, that is overflowing with mercy and hope and hospitality and getting along. When our sign says we love Jesus and follow Jesus, our lives should say that too. So that's where Paul turns his attention in the rest of chapter 12. And it's where we'll dwell today. We're going to look at it kind of verse by verse or collection of verses by collection of verses. We will skip one verse and then we'll come back to it at the very end because it's important. Actually, it's all important, but anyhow. So this is what he says, and it's straightforward. I really could just read it to you and sit down, but I'm going to talk a little bit about each one because I think we need to do that. Don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Don't pretend to love others, really love them. What's it mean to pretend to love somebody? Well, one of the ways we pretend to love somebody is we say, hey, I love you. But then every time I relate to you, my actions don't say I love you. If your actions don't communicate love, it doesn't matter what your words say. It's fake. What Paul's saying here is love with the real deal. And love isn't an emotion or feelings. It isn't words we speak. I mean, it is partly words we speak, but it's backed up with action. It's a verb. It's active. You can't tell somebody you love them and smack them. You can't, well, you as you're raising kids. But you can't tell somebody you love them and then do something that's mean and awful. You can't love Jesus and ignore the people that Jesus puts in your path that need love. So Paul says, don't just pretend to love others, really love them. Hate what is wrong, hold tight to what is good, love each other with genuine affection, and take delight in honoring each other. There's no room for fake love. And the love that we have is a love we've experienced. That's why we say receive love. That comes first, always. And then give love. And repeat again and again and again. God loves each of us. And He demonstrates His love. He demonstrated His love by sending Jesus, by giving us the Holy Spirit. God continues to love us No matter where we've been, no matter what we've done, we're never outside the reach of God's love. And He calls us to love each other in a real way, with genuine affection. And, in seminary, when Sharon and I were in seminary 31 years ago, the New Revised Standard Translation just came out, and I started using it, and I really liked it, and it's a little more scholarly of a translation. But lately, the last 10 years or so, I've been using the New Living Translation. But in the New Revised Standard Translation, it renders the last half of verse 11, verse 10, outdo one another in showing honor. And I really like that translation because it's saying, enter into a competition with each other to see who can show more honor to the other. And when we're showing more honor, if I show a lot of honor to Kelly, then she honors me back, and we get into this competition. It's a beautiful thing that happens in our lives. As opposed to when I act badly toward Kelly and then she acts badly toward me, and it disintegrates. But when we show honor and we work at outdoing one another and showing honor, it becomes a beautiful thing. Our lives as followers of Jesus should be beautiful. And Paul goes on, he says, never be lazy, but work hard and serve the Lord enthusiastically. You ought to be excited about Jesus. It's not a drudgery to follow Jesus. I'm excited to love Jesus and to serve Jesus. And I do it enthusiastically. And so should you. And that's what Paul's saying here. And he goes on and says, rejoice in our confident hope. Confident hope. I love that combination of words. Confident hope. We have hope. And we can be confident in it. Because hope is Jesus. And is what He's offered us. And it ain't going nowhere. And as He taught in the parable of the prodigal son, it doesn't matter where you've been. It doesn't matter what you've done. The son smacked the dad in the face and left with his money and squandered it all and lived with pigs, and then he came back. And he had a confident hope that the father would welcome him, or else he wouldn't have come back. And the thing that blew the son's mind was that the father did more than welcome him. As soon as he saw him coming back to him, he went running to meet him and embraced him and put the best robe and the ring and killed the fatted calf and had a party because his son was back. So you're never outside the reach of God's love. That's what that story tells us. And we can have a confident hope in Christ, in Jesus. And then he says, be patient in trouble and keep on praying. Well, you know what? There's a lot of preachers that tell you once you sign on with Jesus, all the worries of the world are gone. It's hunky-dory, it's rosy, it's wonderful. And that's not so. You've never heard me say that. And if you thought I said that, you're wrong. I didn't, or I'm miscommunicating, because it is not easy to follow Jesus in this world. And that's where Paul's saying, be patient. Be patient in trouble. I want to say be patient in hope, and I knew it wasn't that. That's confident hope ahead. Rejoice in our confident hope. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. And so when life gets tough and the going gets rough, Paul's saying, be patient. Open your eyes, look around, see where God is. Keep praying, keep that connection open, because God's there in the midst of the struggle that you're going through. I was talking to somebody just this week, and they had a lot going on in their lives, and they were struggling at the moment with feeling really down and discouraged. And I said, oh, honey, God is right here. Well, I don't believe it. I don't see Him. I don't know where He is. And I said, well, I was headed elsewhere today, and I hadn't even thought about coming this direction, but here I am. God's using me to embrace you. Well, then, it changed that person's perspective. I've been there. You've been there. Be patient in trouble and keep on praying. And then he goes on, he says, and when God's people are in need, be ready to help them. Always be eager to practice hospitality. Brothers and sisters, you and I may be the only Jesus that people see. And when people have a need and they reach out to us, if we can meet that need, let's do it. Let's practice hospitality. He goes on and says, bless those who persecute you. Now, there's a hard one. Because our typical response to people who persecute us, who beat up on us, who call us names, who do mean things to us, is what? To beat up on them, to call them mean things, to persecute them. But Paul is saying to us, because Jesus taught that we are to bless those who persecute us, don't curse them, and pray that God will bless them. So see, when you start praying for someone who's being mean to you, what happens is your heart toward them changes. And it's not easy, but it's another way of living. It's the way that Jesus calls us to live. Be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. In other words, we're to walk through life together in the good times and the bad. We're to be there with each other and for each other in the midst of the struggle, in the midst of the celebrations. Live in harmony with each other, he says. Harmony. Do you know what harmony is? Did you hear harmony this morning as they sang? It is. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And so when we live in harmony with one another, we're not constantly fighting with one another. We're not constantly calling each other's names. It's a beautiful thing when we live in harmony. We're called to live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. Jesus said the greatest of all is the servant of all. Humble yourselves. You know, too many Christians think that they're better than everybody else. You don't find that in Jesus' teaching at all. And Paul's reminding us of that. He's saying, you Jews who were in this from the beginning, you're not it. It's not just about you, it's about everybody. Get yourself out of the way of what God's doing. And let these Gentiles in. Make room for them. Love them. Live in harmony with each other. Don't be too proud to enjoy the company of ordinary people, and don't think you know it all. And then he goes on. This whole last section, except verse 18, and I'll come back to verse 18. He says, never pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God, for the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. And so in that verse, in our online Bible study group where we look at the passage that we're studying for today, this week, someone asked the question, I don't understand what it means by in doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads. I mean, are we supposed to go out and put burning coals on someone's head? Are we supposed to do these things so that they are shamed? That doesn't feel like a very loving response. And I don't think that's what Paul or the scriptures is teaching us to do. What happens is, have you ever been in a situation where someone treats you treat someone poorly? You're mean to somebody. You've bullied somebody. You've done something that's not so nice to somebody. And instead of bullying you back or being mean to you back, they do something really nice. How big do you feel? Like that? Well, that's the burning coals that heap on your head. That's what creates the shame. When I treat somebody really mean and they're really nice back to me, I become ashamed of my actions. That's what happens. That's what Paul's talking about. That's what scriptures are talking about. We're called to live by another way. So don't pay back evil with more evil. Do things in such a way that everyone can see you're honorable. Don't take revenge. Let that to God. That's His territory. Don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil with good. In other words, when somebody does something mean to you, love them. I mean, Jesus taught that the greatest two commands are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And He even qualified to love your neighbor as yourself. He said, even love your enemies. I mean, that's when it gets real. That's when it gets hard. That's when we need to call on the strength of Christ in us. I can't love my enemies, not in and of myself. But with God's help through Christ, I can. And so can you. And then verse 18. He says, do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. And I use this all the time in counseling situations with people. You know, when we're in a situation where someone is acting poorly or badly toward me, or it's just not going well, can I change that person? No. But can I change me? Yes. Can I decide how I'm going to respond to that person who's treating me badly, meanly, poorly? Yes. And so what Paul's saying is, do whatever it takes to live at peace with someone. He's not saying do whatever it takes to change that person. He's saying do whatever it takes to change you. You know, that's a principle that applies in a lot of situations in our lives, in every relationship you have. Again, the New RSV, I like that translation, the way they render it. They say, as far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. That puts a responsibility on me and on you. Do all that we can to live in peace, to love, to extend mercy and grace. You see, brothers and sisters, following Jesus is not about the tattoos we put on our bodies, the jewelry that we wear, the t-shirts that we wear. I mean, Kelly has a beautiful t-shirt. It says, Jesus, others, and you. But that t-shirt don't make her a Christian. She has a bumper sticker on the back of her car. I have a bunch of bumper stickers. My truck is tatted up with bumper stickers. But none of that makes us a Christian. It's the love that we share. It's the grace that we extend. It's the peace that we bring. It's the Jesus working in and through us as we show up in the world that makes us a Christian. And that's what Paul's saying here. Do all that you can to have real love. First receive it, then give it, and repeat that again and again and again. Everywhere you show up with love. Be gracious to one another. Weep with those who are weeping. Laugh with those who are laughing. You know, on and on and on. He's talking about following Jesus in real life. And one thing you notice in this, he didn't say, okay, you Jews, this is for you, or you Gentiles, this is for you. He didn't say anything about practices or anything. He's talking about life. He's talking about a way of for us to live our lives that's real, that's authentic, that's genuine. And that brings Jesus everywhere we go in our world. Not bringing Jesus with the Bible and beating somebody over the head, as we often do. I like to pick on Kelly. She's got big shoulders and she can handle it. And she knows I love her dearly. But, you know, that's how we show up in the world so often. Instead, show up as a servant with love and grace and mercy. It makes us better. It makes the people that we interact with better. It makes our world better. And part of the prayer that Jesus taught us was, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We don't have to just wait till we get there. We've got a task to do here. And that is to represent Jesus. So I've talked a lot, and I talked a lot more than I intended to talk this morning. What thoughts are going through?